Unless we are honest with ourselves, we will find it incredibly challenging to find coherence within the world around us. Because everything you experience around you has an origination point within you. After all, you are the ultimate perceiver of your unique bubble of reality. Every single one of us is navigating this life, perhaps with certain shared experiences. But the way we are interpreting those experiences can vary vastly from person to person, group to group. You could almost say there are billions of individual universes all appearing to share one same or similar space. And at the time of recording this video, we are actually at such a moment where it can appear like two people are inhabiting nearly identical external looking realities, but having a completely different inner experience. And one of the reasons this is so profound right now is that regardless of what's going on outside of you, this video shows up as yet another reminder directly to yourself as to the inherent power you have to navigate each present moment, not just based on the way you perceive it, but how the way you perceive everything can also ignite a cascade in your external reality, in who you meet, what situations emerge, and ultimately could change the experience of your reality from the inside out. I'm Danielle Lynn. I talk to creators such as yourself who are intentionally remembering just how darn powerful you really are, and not because you need to prove it to yourself or anyone else, but because you're ready to truly be energy effective in your world and in your life. Now, what we're about to dive into in today's conversations will have applications for your personal life and how you would like to live. I speak a lot about alchemy on this channel, and a big part of alchemy is it's essentially a merging, a transmutation, an integration of all aspects involved. And in the case of true self-alchemy, we're considering all elements of what compose a self, which in this case can involve things such as the physical, such as your body, such as the material of your life, but can also include things like your mental state, your emotional state, how you feel, what you like. All of these things are materials for your life laboratory, so to speak. And where a lot of people find themselves challenged in living the version of life they prefer is there's usually something in their life laboratory that they are repressing, ignoring, maybe mislabeling, maybe misaligning with, maybe separating themselves from, maybe they're not even aware it's there. There's a number of reasons like this, although those are a few of the common ones. When you arrive at this particular video, you are ready for a kind of distillation in the laboratory of your life where you're actually asking yourself more and more, what am I willing to say no to? What am I willing to complete? What am I willing to let go of? That may have been really awesome, and now I'm ready for a new step. And now you're ready to take off the training wheels. No more training wheels, no more bumpers. Access your inner knowing. Knowing exactly what is the step to take right now that is the most congruent for you so that you can live a life you enjoy. A lot of people have a vague definition of what matters to them. And it usually sounds something like, I want to be happy, I want to feel good, I want to do the things I like. Maybe there's certain flavors to it. I want this much money in the bank. I don't want to be stressed all the time. And these things that we're describing, they're symptoms. It's beautiful to have or want whatever symptoms you want. And I would love for you to more effectively connect to the symptoms you want to experience. So the very first step to understand is what you consistently cultivate within yourself is going to be the result of the external reality you continue to face again and again. 2, if you are doing the same thing over and over and you are not seeing results, this is an invitation to make a shift. You might even have used a tool, or you may have approached something in a way that worked for a while. And if you have diligently and with your full heart and spirit applied your presence to shifting something and it doesn't appear to be shifting, then this is a moment to go within and say, what now? Sometimes we get very dogmatic about our systems and approaches, especially when they have helped us through a certain scenario. But sometimes the vehicle that took you to one point in your life isn't actually the vehicle to continue with at this juncture in your life. I actually point to this a lot. When you arrive at a certain level of development, you actually arrive at a point where you realize sometimes the things that are for you to let go of, or the things that are for you to release, are not necessarily bad things. They're not necessarily negative things. They just may be ways of approaching and moving in life that keep you in a certain pattern. And in order for you to move in a new way, it involves a shift. An example I'll share with you is the dragonfly's life cycle. For the first part of their life, they actually live underwater. And then there's a period of time when they finally emerge from the water, they molt, develop wings, and now they fly. They never re-enter the water again, at least not the way that they once did. What they do now is they fly. Now, it doesn't mean that the way they were living underwater was incorrect or wrong or bad, and it may have been deeply enjoyable. But in order to go to the next cycle, they needed to sacrifice. They needed to choose to let go of their aquatic life in order for them to embrace their airborne life. And all of us are coming across similar junctures in our journey where we're being very clearly invited to explore inwardly and outwardly. What am I willing to close in my life? What chapter am I willing to bring to completion? What am I willing to shift? What am I willing to let go of? What am I willing to sacrifice in order to embody the experience of me that I truly know that I prefer at this moment? Something that's so cool about this is we arrive at this juncture when you have a certain level of spiritual maturity, because instead of making changes in your life through cataclysms or through scarcity or constant struggle, this usually represents a deliberate choice, an opportunity to be deliberate with the way that you are choosing to meet the world and meet the moment. So some of the things that might be coming up for review could actually include things like romantic relationships, but also friend groups or friendships. It could be something more abstract, like the way you help people or the way that you say yes or no. It could be the way that you focus your thoughts and energy. For example, sometimes we actually have a habit of being in doubt spirals. And some people might say, well, that's a weird habit. I wouldn't choose that. Well, consciously or unconsciously, we do. And oftentimes the payoff of doing something like being in a doubt or fear spiral is you don't have to act. Now, that might seem like not a great exchange, and generally it's because it's usually not one that we find preferable. And yet, I'm pointing out to you that there is an exchange going on. Some part of you may feel relief or resonant, even being in prolonged or chronic pain or anxiety, if it means that they don't have to act, because they may perceive the chronic pain and anxiety as preferable to the perceived extreme fear of taking action in a direction towards the unknown. Usually, the transmutation for something like that is to simply take action, to take imperfect action. If, on the other hand, there is a person who always takes action and never gives themselves time to rest, then the answer for that is to rest. I'm sharing that for clarity because it's not about anytime you feel fear, take action, and nor is the action about trying to conquer the fear. The action and the rest are actually a deep integration with your experience of fear. When you approach integrating your fears in this way, what you are really doing is saying, I love myself enough to move beyond what was once a seemingly insurmountable barrier so that I may give myself the freedom and the gift of seeing what is through the other side. But there's no amount of mental preparation or thinking that we can do that will completely eradicate the fear, because this is another thing some people do. They'll sometimes plan and plan and plan and think and think and think and tell themselves, well, of course I'm going to go through the fear, but first I got to figure out this, 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 and this. And those are just delay tactics. Those are things that we do in order to procrastinate moving through the fear. I know that for some that this may feel like a call out. The intention of this is more neutral than that. The intention of this is the connection with you and your awareness. Because even if you choose to not make a move, knowing that the fear is present and you are choosing to not yet integrate with the fear, now you have moved into unknowing and self-deception around fear, into clarity around what you're choosing and why you're choosing it. What this does is it shifts your dynamic from playing games of hide and seek within your own psyche, which is what a lot of people do with their psyche. When you don't know how to address a challenge, you'll tuck it in to the subconscious somewhere, and then what will happen is you'll play out these patterns in one form or another, and it will feel very confusing. If you're at the juncture where you're ready to actually move into the fear, it's not about strong arming yourself through. It's not about beating yourself up or grabbing yourself by the ear and dragging yourself across the threshold. But it's also not about leaning into delay tactics or buying into the pause. You know, anyone who has kids probably knows this one. Imagine if you had a child that was trying to not go to sleep. And so the child's going to do anything and everything they can. Oh, read me a story. Oh, I'm cold, or I'm hot, or I need some water. I need some this, or I need some that. And it's that similar kind of delay tactic that the inner self will sometimes do when it doesn't want to face something. And so the answer to most of these things is to be very direct with the self. And you say, what is it? Thank you for protecting me. What is it that you're afraid of? What is it that you're protecting me from? And sometimes initially you'll feel, I don't know. And that's okay. Because sometimes it even feels scary to acknowledge what you're afraid of. But the answer here, I find, is to be persistent with yourself and within yourself. Because what you're doing is you're inviting yourself to operate from a sense of love. And love is really just about cohesion. It's about being receptive to everything going on. It's a shift from othering aspects of yourself into embodying aspects of yourself. So long as a person employs strategies for avoiding and fixing and augmenting parts of the self, you will continue to find yourself coming up again and again and again to familiar doors and familiar places, because it's really just the part of you that's popping up again and again and again to ultimately be integrated. When you finally choose to embrace that fear, and when you finally choose to sacrifice what has been known for you to step into the unknown, you actually experience a pretty profound sense of peace, of relief. Because once you've actually made the choice, there's nothing else to think anymore. There's no more need to debate whether you made the right choice, the wrong choice. But would it matter at that juncture? Because right now you're in the middle of the experience. Right now you are in the transformation. You're in the threshold. You're moving through. You can reflect on your choice when the cycle is complete. But if you're in the middle of it, that would be like you're making a cake and then halfway through you're eating the raw egg and going, oh, this tastes nothing like a cake. Why did I mix all these ingredients? Although to be fair, cake batter sometimes tastes really delicious. Talking about cake a lot lately. And so I feel like the invitation that we're all on right now is whatever it is that you feel pressure or challenge with, that right there is the thing you're being invited to integrate. It's less about the situation itself and more about your feeling, your relationship to the situation. That is key. I'll emphasize this again and again because so long as we think we have to fix something external for us to feel better internal, you're going to get the whack-a-mole going. So one of the steps you can take to actually address all of this is to develop your inner listening. Now, to be clear, when you're actively listening within, it's not exactly passive. It may feel that way to us in a certain level, but it's almost more like an active passivity. There's a part of you that's being more present in the moment and in the flow and not necessarily attempting to overthink everything going on. So, in a similar way, when you're actively listening within yourself, you're not listening from the space of imagining that you're disadvantaged somehow or something's wrong or something needs to be fixed. You're listening simply with the clarity of someone who moves with knowing. Everyone has times of rising and everyone has times of falling. It doesn't mean that you're somehow superior to the totality because you're rising right now, just as it doesn't mean you're inferior because right now you're falling. Everybody has cycles of growth and cycles of decline. We have individual cycles of that. We have group cycles of that. We have greater collective country cycles of that. We have global cycles of that. And the answer here is to neither overemphasize your identification with the rise or the fall of things, but rather to be so anchored within that active listening observer space that you actually understand what step to take now, where your empowerment is. I'll point back here to the earlier question I asked, which is, what do you feel ready to sacrifice and let go of on some level? What do you feel complete with? Some of the answers may be more apparent than others. But if you want something new in life, there is some form of exchange. The thing I have found is that sacrifice is oftentimes in proportion to what you consider matters. And you might go, wait, Danielle, we're reality creators. We can make anything we want. Absolutely. You're playing in the field of this reality. So you're playing with certain agreed upon structures. You yourself, the consciousness that is you, is unlimited. You having a specific experience in your specific form has certain parameters that you yourself have created and cultivated. And part of this was for the joy of a unique experience. A final note for today, because I think this is very fun to play with. Some people might contemplate, well, what do I mean by sacrifice? What do I mean by sacrifice? Something for you to consider in this world and in your life in general. When you get mad at life not being the way you expect it to turn out, you are overlaying your projections onto a situation and you are not actually participating in co-creating with life. You are attempting to strong-arm reality rather than listening and responding. The model I'm sharing with you suggests that in a very interesting way, you actually have the access points to create everything you want. It just may not have been the way you thought you were going to create it. The interesting pathway is, in order to actually realize this in your life, it involves a certain degree of letting go of your attachments to how you thought things needed to be, so that you have enough spaciousness to actually start moving and maneuvering and connecting in this life in a way where you are thriving. So you may be really sacrificing your old view and model on life in order to actually embody and live the version of life that is your most thriving, resonant yes. If you've enjoyed this exploration and conversation, I invite you to check out the flow book, check out the description link. I also have access to the lab on there. And very shortly here, we're starting some new workshops so we can go deeper with these concepts and some practical application experiences for those who are genuinely ready to create in material ways in their life. In all cases, my friend, as always, I enjoy our time together, and I see you continuing to connect to your most thriving path yet.